Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here for our Formula Fitness. This is the second in our Formula Fitness series. Last time we did a whole deep dive on filtering, which you can actually watch the replays on our Crowdcast channel. So if you want to catch that, certainly can. But today is all about contains, matches, and find. And lucky for all of you, I'm joined by my fabulous colleague, Al. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name's Maria Marquis, and here at Coda, I just love nerding out with our customers. I love hanging out with all of you. I love teaching you. I love learning from you. I really just love that outreach, and that's my main focus here. You've probably also seen me in a lot of our videos because that's what I do. I talk for a living. That's my jam. But I'm joined by my fabulous colleague, Al, and Al and I are going to be working together on today's Formula Fitness session. Hey, Karina, welcome. Al, do you want to introduce yourself to the group in case they don't know who you are and tell them a little bit about you?
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Al. I've done a couple of these cardcasts with Maria in the past, and really excited to be a part of this one because one of the reasons why I love Coda is because of the formula language, and it's kind of a weird thing to say, but I do love me some formulas, especially as a person that's coming from Excel and Google Sheets, where I was writing formulas all day. And Coda formulas are a breath of fresh air, to be honest, but it does take a little bit to understand if you're coming from the spreadsheet world.
Yeah.
And my role in the team, I help a lot of our users build their docs. I also help them promote their docs to new audiences. And a lot of the docs you see in the gallery, coda.io/gallery, those are docs I've worked on with folks in the community. Some of you may be here in this crowdcast today. And yeah, I just love helping people build their templates, trying to figure out how to structure them, writing the formulas to create them so they work for other people. And yeah, I love my formulas.
I know, I'd love it. Hey, there's so much pride to be had in that nerd credibility. And what I think is so cool about Al's background is that he's done deep dives in Excel and Google Sheets, and he also has a deep Coda knowledge. So he's got this really cool perspective on kind of where the two meet and diverge, and we're going to be really digging into that today. Before we start the session, though, I just want to make sure everybody knows how today is going to work. So over on the right side of your screen, and a lot of you have found it already, which is great, we do have that chat field that's open for you at any point in time to say something, whatever's on your mind. Feel free to post things there. But we also have along the bottom of the screen this Ask a Question button. And if you click on that, that's going to go ahead and log your question. It'll make sure that Al and I don't miss it. And it's also a great way to see what other people are asking. And if you have the same question, you can upvote or downvote. So Al and I can make sure we cover all of the most pressing questions first in that case. Oh, great. Yes, welcome you. So good to have you here. So ask a question in the chat field. No such thing as an interruption today. Please feel free at any point in time, put whatever's on your mind in either of those places, and Al and I will make sure that we answer your question. Because even though we have some things we want to share today, ultimately, making sure you leave with all of your questions answered, or at least a better idea of where to go next, is our primary job. So please feel free any point in time, if you've got a question, let us know. Also, to kick us off and to make sure everyone's found the chat field, if you could just post to chat on a scale of 1 to 5. Oh my gosh, Matt joining us from Australia. Is it very early morning for you right now? I know we've got some folks in Europe, so this is their evening, enjoying their evening with us. But on a scale of, what is it, Al?
I think it's 5 a.m. in Australia. So whoever's in Australia,
you are correct. Wow.
You are a hero.
Matt, you get every gold star that is available. But Al and I would just love to know, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being I'm just getting started, I've never written a formula in my life, 3 being I've done some formula work in Coda or another system, and then 5 being I'm a super formula wizard. I know all kinds of things about formulas. Where do you think you would rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 5? There's no shame wherever you're coming from. It's just helpful for Al and I to know. Nice. 4+, also 9 p.m. in the Netherlands. Thank you for joining us for your evening here, Joost. Nice. 2s, 4s. Great. Nice variety here. Fantastic. And I'd also just love to know, what is the primary tool that you've been writing formulas in? Has it been Excel, Google Sheets? Has it been Coda? Has it been MySQL? Just so we can know kind of where you're starting from, what your first language is, if you will. Nice. Excel for Vanan. Nice. Coda. Yeah. Woohoo. Nice. Excel in the past, but Coda recently. Yeah, a lot of us are recovering spreadsheet folks. Airtable and Coda, Google Sheets, Coda. Nice, both equally. Yeah, and Al can speak to this. Al has not stopped using Excel. Al still will use it at various points in time because there is a time and a place for everything. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started with our formula fitness today. So you should see it in a moment. And Al, if you could just let me know when it's coming through to make sure we've got everything we need here to get started. Awesome.
Yep, looks great.
Okay, cool. So here we have our Coda formulas. And I thought it would just be helpful to start off with, and what we'll do is we'll actually share this doc after the fact so that all of you can pop in here and be able to play and redo some of the exercises that we'll be walking through. But you can make that copy. But today our focus is around a couple different formulas. So when we think about Coda, you probably have a lot of tables with a lot of information in them, but you don't want to see all of that information every single time. Or maybe you're curious about how many times something has happened or how many things meet your criteria. And all of the little formula pieces we're going to be talking about today allow you to narrow in on that idea. And those of you who attended our filter formula fitness, a lot of this actually has some overlap there. So if we think about when you're looking for something, you might have a simple equals, right? I'm looking for exactly this one thing. You might also have two things you're comparing. And in this case, you would use matches, right? I want to match this one thing with this other thing. But the thing about matches is that it's always a one-to-one. Because sometimes we have a list of a lot of things, and we want to know if one of our criteria is listed there. For example, maybe if we go over here to our data section, go ahead. Notice over here on the right side of the page, we have this column that says type. And notice some of these have one selection, some of these have two. Matches wouldn't work in this case of the type A, type B, because matches is always a one-to-one. So matches would only catch anytime both type A and type B were listed. But what if we're interested in anytime type A was listed? Matches is not going to do the job. And that's why contains is so valuable, because contains allows you to say, hey, for all this stuff, is what I'm looking for in there somewhere? And that's where contains is going to be your best friend. We also have a couple other sort of adjustments on contains, which is contains all and also contains only. These allow you to narrow in a little bit more, get more detailed. Like maybe I want to know every time type A and type B were listed, I'm going to do contains all in my request. And maybe I only want to see anytime type A was listed once by itself, I would use contains only. So these are some ways for us to narrow in and get a little bit clearer. And it's all about kind of querying our data, asking our data information about what's inside so we can understand a little bit more about it. So Al, if you think about matches, contains, and sort of all of these different formula pieces, when do you think it's a signal for folks, hey, it's time for me to start using this formula? When do you see this come up most often in your experience?
Yeah, as Maria talked about, the most common places is with select lists. For those of you who are new to Coda, select lists are basically kind of like drop downs in Coda. And when you know that you want to select something and there's a one-to-one match, like Maria said, that's when you should use contains. Now, sometimes you want to use this in a table as well. For those of you coming from Excel or Google Sheets who are used to building really long formulas in a table in Excel or Google Sheets, you may also think about using matches and contain. Well, you may be thinking about using matches and contains in your Coda tables as well. Some examples of when you might want to use matches or contains in a Coda table is when you want to summarize data. So just making this up, you have a long table of sales data by products or whatever, and hundreds and hundreds of rows. And you want to quickly create a summary table of like, how many products did I buy for this product? What was the total number of sales for a certain category? That's where you would also think about using matches and contains. Now, the analogy to spreadsheets is doing things like sum if and count if. I think some people, when they just kind of a broader kind of tip is when you come from Excel or Google Sheets, it's tempting to try to take a formula you know with Google Sheets or Excel and see how it works in Coda. It's never going to be a one-to-one match. And for instance, there is a match function in Excel and Google Sheets, and allows you to take a value and match it in a range of cells. That's kind of what matches does also,
Mhm.
but matches allows you to work with lists of data. And lists are kind of similar to a range of cells in Excel or Google Sheets, but there are some differences, and we'll try to get into some of those nuances in this crowdcast. But in general, our team looked at Excel, Google Sheets, and how these functions work, and we thought, what if we can make this easier to use and apply to many more use cases?
Mhm.
And that's where we have things like matches, contains, contains only, contains all.
Mhm.
But yeah, well, as we go through the formula fitness, you'll see how we can use these different examples, and it might spark some ideas for how you can filter and summarize your data. But I think at a high level, you would want to use these functions for select lists, as Maria said, but also
Mhm.
for summarizing data when you want to have like a summary table of all your stats.
Yeah, totally. And I think Al makes up a really good point here, like he always does, because Al is brilliant, that
Oh,
a
I love
lot of
you.
things that that we have in Coda might feel familiar, but we have kind of revisited how they work. So for example, our formula language, like Al says, has a lot of things that look similar to what you might see in Excel or Google Sheets. But what we've done is we've flipped it around. So instead of starting with the function and then having lots of parentheses, we actually start with the table we're looking for. Like, which table do we want to analyze? Then what part of the table are we interested in? And then what do we want to do with that information? It makes it so it's much more easy to read, kind of left to right, like you would a story. So let's actually jump in. I think the key differences, though, when we think about matches and contains, matches is going to be the thing you use when you have a one-to-one comparison, and contains is going to be the thing you use when you have a potential for having one item in a bigger list of like one-to-many. So those are the ways that I generally like to keep that in mind. Also, Al, I think you make a really good point around how you think about using contains as the default. Do you want to chat a little bit about that while I open up our first exercise?
Sure. I'm maybe Maria can correct me if I'm wrong, but we actually did not have a contains function for some time. I think
That's true.
we only had matches, and the primary use case for matches was for select lists when you want to like filter a table or view based on a select
Mhm.
list. So matches again does one-to-one.
Mhm.
Contains, however, does like many to many. So if you have a list of products and you want to figure out if that list contains shirts, pants, and shoes,
Mhm.
you would use contains because you want to see, hey, I have these three products. I want to see if these three products exist in this bigger list of products.
Mhm.
So you would use contains.
Yeah.
But I actually default to only using contains these days because contains also lets you do one-to-one.
Mhm.
So in your mind, you can think like, if you use contains, whether you're doing a one-to-one match or like a many-to-many match, like contains is kind of like does both things really well.
Mhm.
So I think for most of you out there who are beginning to use Coda, I would rely on contains as kind of your main function or formula function
Mhm.
to learn how to use, because that will solve, I guarantee, 95% of all the use cases that you're trying
For
to do
sure.
in Coda. There are some niche use cases for using matches, for contains all, contains only. But just remember, if there's anything you walk away with from this crowdcast, is remember to use the contains function. That's all I
Mhm.
can say.
Perfect. Crowdcast
Everything
done.
will fall into line. But yeah, and again, this is you won't find a function like this in Excel or Google Sheets. You can find things that are similar. You can build nested functions. We can talk a little about that with like index match and stuff. But it's a really like, I consider it contains like a workhorse function because it does
Yeah.
many, and also one-to-one.
Mhm. So if you're ever unsure, like, what should I use contains as your starter, because that's probably going to be the right call. So let's explore how this works in the wild. And also, just as a reminder, folks, you don't need to wait for Al and I to stop talking. If you've got a question, please feel free at any point in time, let us know. We'll be happy to assist you there. So here we go. We have a table called blog posts, which is over here in our data table. Let's just go ahead and revisit that again. Notice here we got this giant blog post table. It's got a link here. It's got a people column. It's got a date column. It's got a single select list. It's got a text area, it's got a checkbox, and it also has a multi-select list over here. So lots of different things that are happening. And the question that we want to answer is, how many of those blog posts do we have with a category from this little drop-down menu below? This is called a select list control. If you ever want to add one to your Coda docs, you just do slash, and then you can go ahead and choose to type control, which will pull up all of the options that we've got for controls. You can also just type select list. That'll pull it up for you. But in this case, I've got this category going on. So here, because we have this select list, what we need to do is make a relationship between those two different areas. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal my answer. In this case, we have 0 that match it. But I'm going to go ahead and right-click. Al, get off my formula.
Sorry about that.
That's all good. The beauties of collaborative work. At least I knew where you were, right? So here we go. Notice we've got this formula, which in this case is the blog post. We're going to filter by the category, and we want the category to match the category selector, which is this guy right up here. You notice it's highlighted in pink, and this is pink. That lets me know it's the same place. And then we want to count it. So first, what table are we interested in? Then what do we want to do with that table? What part are we interested in? And then what do we want to do with the information? So notice here we are using matches, and we're using matches because this is a single select list. And back in our table, it's also a single select list. So here we're doing that 1-to-1. Pretty standard in this case. Al, looking at this formula, anything else that you think is important for folks to know about how this is put together?
No, I think another workhorse function, again, and this is applying to all of Coda, not just matches and contains, is the filter formula.
Yes.
Maria has probably talked about this multiple times in the past, but filter will also handle 95% of what you're trying to do in Coda. And coincidentally, Google Sheets now has the filter function available to you. I think they released it like a year or two, maybe 3 years ago.
For us.
Yeah. Before that, you had to do using COUNTIF, SUMIF, maybe some array formulas in Excel or Google Sheets. But now, filter is kind of this really, again, I call it one of my workhorse functions to get things done. So that's kind of another important thing to call out here in this formula. But to Maria's point, in Coda, you always think about the names of things versus A1 to C5. In this case, we talked about that blog post table, which is a list of all of these blog posts and different attributes about the blog post. And we're simply just taking that table, which is the very first thing you see here in the formula, and filtering it by a few conditions. And the main condition here is looking at whether or not the category matches what you have in the select list. So we're showing a case of just 1-to-1 matching. And then I think that's probably the main thing to think about for this formula. Like, I don't know if did you talk about the count yet? I'm not sure. Sorry if you.
Oh, just this is like what we want to then do with the information. This is kind of at the end. Now that we know the information we're interested in, what do we want to do with it? Yeah.
So I think everything before the count, just thinking about like you're filtering a bunch of rows into this formula, and then that count just counts the number of rows that results from that filter. If you're coming from Excel or Google Sheets, you're probably used to putting that count on the outside of the formula. So you do count, left parentheses, and then everything else, which you can also do in Coda. But one of the things about formulas in Coda is that we just don't like to have multiple nested parentheses. So that's why we do these dots instead of multiple parentheses. And this will probably take some time getting used to when you're coming from Excel or Google Sheets. But again, from me coming from a background in Excel, like I find this much easier to read and write. And hopefully you do too.
And I'll just say, I just changed it here, but in this case, I decided, instead of counting it, I want to make a bulleted list. So you can change what you want this ending to be for anything. Like I want it to be a sum, or I want it to be an average. So there's lots of flexibility with that final point. So that's the first one, again, because we have this single select list right up here at the top. And we also have the single select list in our data that tells us matches is where we're going to go. But we could totally use contains here as well, right? That's not, it's an option because it's sort of not every rhombus is a square, but every square is a rhombus kind of situation. All right, so let's move on to exercise number 2. So now what we want to do is we want to know how many blog posts do we have with the category from the drop down below. And in this case, this drop down menu is a multi-select list. So we want to do something a little bit different here. So let's go ahead and reveal our answer. I'm going to right click. Notice here what we're doing is we're using contains because we want to know it's not just a one-to-one. I've selected 7 different items here. So I want to make sure that this is a flexible enough formula to account for the many things that I am interested in. So it doesn't matter if it's one of these on its own or 2 of them together. I just want to know anytime these are listed, it doesn't matter which combination they are in. Al, anything else on kind of the differences between the 2 things that we're seeing here that we should mention for folks?
Yeah, and then I think the one thing to note is that this dropdown is a multi-select, so you can select multiple different things.
Yeah.
But Maria could easily deselect everything and only select one thing, and contains would still work. And that was the key point I was trying to get across earlier, is that contains now is kind of acting a little bit like matches, but contains has a flexibility of being able to allow you to select multiple things or one thing. Yeah. And your table will get filtered down to exactly what you want to filter it on.
So this is why Al and I usually talk about contains on these select lists as being like future-proofing your doc, because it allows you to, maybe you realize I actually want to have this be a multi-select. You don't have to worry about changing your formulas then. So it's a helpful way to kind of have it grow along with you. All right, awesome. And it looks like we got some questions here. So let's go ahead and handle that. Cool. So we've got a question, which is a specific one. I love specific questions, which is I'm creating an internal Reddit in your Coda doc, and you have a questions table and an answers table. How would I show the most upvoted answer to a question in the questions table? I currently have the top voted answer column. Ooh, very cool. So the first thing I would ask is, have you seen our drag and drop template for topic voting? That would be my first recommendation. So let's go ahead and just pop it in here. I'm going to type / and do topic voting. There we go. We have this built-in kind of Reddit type module that's just part of how this is working together. And there's another one, which is upvote, downvote table, which would also have a downvote option. Then you'd be able to see this is actually automatically sorted by the number of upvotes that are in this particular table. So it automatically show up at the top. But Al, do you want to talk about the options in this case for displaying that formulaically? What do you think?
Yeah. Are you talking about for the specific question or for the topic?
Yeah, for this specific question around, I want to be able to show the most top voted answer in this case to the question.
Yeah, I think and for those of you on the Crowdcast who want to look at the question, it might help. Just click on that question, because the Van On has posted the formula that they're using as well, and at the very end, so they have answers that filter, questions that contains this row that first. So the first function is something we're not talking about in this Crowdcast, but the first function is just it returns literally the number one result that comes back from a filter formula. So if you have 100 rows and you filtered it down to 50, the first will just say, give me back the first row from that list of 50. In this case, since we're trying to tabulate the number of the most top voted answer in the questions table, I would actually do a count at the end of this answers that filter, questions that contains this row, because you want to count the number of times that question has been upvoted in the answers table. I believe I kind of have to see how the structure of your answers table looks, but some point along the line you need to count the number of votes that given question has had, and then that number will go inside your questions table. I know for those of you listening, it's kind of hard to visualize this, but trying to answer this question on the fly.
Yeah, totally.
I would experiment with adding the count at the very end of this this formula, but you're using the contains function in this case is right. Like, I think you're on the right track there. I would just experiment with using count at the end of this formula.
Awesome. Thanks, Al. Perfect. But I will say that the topic voting table, even if you're not planning on building a full Reddit-like doc like Banan is doing, I think that topic voting is a great way to bring that in to any document. So for example, here at Coda, we use the topic voting in every single meeting that we run. It's a place for folks to put, here are the questions I have. Oh, I also have that question. I'd like it to be answered by, Shashir in our all hands or whatever it might be. But it's also a great way to kind of gauge how people feel about things, or if you're trying to figure out what should we talk about in our meeting, people can put the topics they'd like to chat about. So I think it's a really helpful little module that you can just pop right into your Coda docs. Great question, which is, do we get to this category in this case, the Coda doc that we're working off of, also via controls? So yeah, let me show you how we added this kind of drop-down menu. So here, this particular drop-down menu, I'm going to go ahead and just right-click on it. This is going to open it up for me. Here, what I'm doing is for the selectable items, I'm just pulling all of the items from our categories table. And I did that by toggling on this formula, typing equals, and choosing categories. So let's go ahead and just start from scratch again. So notice it shows me all of my tables that I've got inside of Coda. I could start typing, oh, yep, categories, there it is. And then I can just leave it at that. And that's going to be my select list. And that's pulling over here from my data along the side. Sorry, my internet's being a little bit pokey today. And it's right up here, this full categories table, which coincidentally is also being pulled in here to the blog post. This is a special kind of column called a lookup column. What I'm doing is I'm making a select list, but I'm having it pull the selections from that categories table. So hopefully that answered your question there, Karina. Excellent. Awesome. And keep those questions coming, everybody. At any point in time, we are more than happy to answer them. That's, again, part of why Al and I are here today. All right, so let's head back to our workout routine. I'm just going to move some things around here really quickly. All right, great. Cool. All right, so let's move on to exercise number 3. So here what we want to do is we want to find the number of blog posts that meet both of the following conditions. It has type A in the type column and product as the category. So what we're seeing here is now the criteria we have are expanding. And we also know that the type column is a multi-select and the product category, that is a single select. So let's go ahead and reveal the answer here. I'm going to go ahead and right click, which is going to let me open up that formula. So notice we have the same beginning, blog posts, and the same ending, which is counting. Just our middle is a little bit different. So what we're doing is we're filtering where the type contains type A and the category is equal to product. That's because the type column is multi-select, so we're using that contains, and the category is one thing. We just want to know when it's equal to product. Now, Al, I actually don't know the answer to this now that I'm thinking about it. Could we do category.matches product for that second part? Or would it equals be the primary here?
I think matches matches should work.
Let's go ahead and try it.
Yeah.
Let's see. So a little parentheses there. Cool. Yep, looks like it does still work. Oh, wrong argument type. What did I do? Where did I go wrong? Matches expects a parameter control to be a control. So in this case, matches is looking for a control like we had before, that drop-down menu. So in this case, equals is going to be the way to go. Very cool.
Yeah, I think also the matches, again, back to the history of the Coda formula language, is matches was really meant to be used for these select lists and to work with formulas. So that's why the error message even itself said, hey, this is actually this matches function is actually meant to be used with a control, which we call, it's a broader term for our select list and our button. It's meant to be used with that type of object or select list object. So equals does only work in this case.
Cool. But in this case, equals, if we think about that, equals is also a one-to-one, right? But in this case, we're looking for like a one-to-one value, not like a one-to-one between this table and another mechanism, like that control and the table. Do those two things match? Here, we just want to know, is that thing equal to this idea of product? And there's no control or select list here that we're trying to match off of, so it makes sense. I also just want to sort of call something out that as you're writing formulas, you're not going to get them right 100% of the time, right? Just I write formulas all the time, and here I made a mistake. But you can always sort of double check your work through like the error message that we see. So let's actually just go ahead and have that error message again. It was so beautiful. Let's go ahead and just pop it in. So for example, here's an error message, missing a close parentheses. I can go, all right, well, let me just click on my parentheses. All right, here's the beginning and here's the end. So it's not that one. How about this one? Okay, there's the beginning and there's the end. And then here I can be like, oh, where's the beginning and the end? Looks like I need another one right there to close out the whole thing. So you can do that double checking. You can also double check across your colors. Like, okay, this is coming from another table. These are coming from the same table. That's a value. Great. And then you can take a look at some of the other things that you're seeing here. So it's just, we're trying to give you information in this place. And as you start working, you can start to be learning from it. So I always encourage folks to check their work. Al, any words of wisdom on that idea?
Yeah, I think experimenting with the formula for something definitely helps. Actually, one thing I wanted to call out on this formula, so we use match. I think the most complicated part of this formula is the category equals product portion. The reason why I say that is because let's look at the colors really quick. So unlike Excel and Google Sheets, in Excel and Google Sheets, when you say equals A1 to AB5, you see the cells it's actually referencing. In Coda, again, we use the name of objects. So blog post is a table. Filter type is a column in the blog post table. But type A happens to be the select list where we're, this is a row in tables type.
It's the row.
Oh, it's a row,
types is also a lookup column, yeah.
Yeah, so the main thing here is that type and category are both green because they belong as columns to the blog post table. Type A and product, this is like a really new concept for new Coda users who are coming from Excel or Google Sheets, is that we're actually referencing an actual row in one of these tables. So
I'll pull it up.
Yeah. So
there.
This is a small types table. It's literally a table of 2 rows and 1 column. And type A is like that row from the table. Sure, trying to find where that table, where a blog post matches that type. And then in the categories table, we have a different categories for blog posts, and product is just 1 row in that categories table. And so when we try to filter, if you go back to the formula, when we're filtering the blog post table, we're pulling in the actual rows from those tables to match against the main blog post table. So this is pretty different from Excel or Google Sheets, because in Excel or Google Sheets, you're just saying, hey, does my type equal cell C5 and does my category equal D2? You're just referencing cells. Whereas in Coda, you're referencing the actual row from the table.
Yeah.
So a little kind of overall, that's kind of like the model to think about is in Coda, everything is kind of like a name, and you just have to put those names into your formula.
Yeah. And you can also notice you can click on any one of these and it lets you know what that is, right? This is a row in the categories table. It has 3 columns. This is a row in the types table. It has 1 column. If I click here, this is a column in the blog post table, and it's going to give me a list from types. And then blog post, this is a table with 46 rows and 13 columns. So if you're ever wondering, like, why is it a different color? What is this thing? Am I pulling the right thing? You can always just click on that. It's going to let you know a little bit more too. All right, so let's take a look at exercise number 4. So now what we want to do is we want to find the number of blog posts that are featured or meet both of the following conditions: has type A in the type column and product in the category. So here, the end of this question is what we've just done, but we're adding this new little element, which is it featured or? So we've got 2 different chunks. So let's actually jump back over to our data and see what this featured column is all about. So notice if we scroll down to our blog post table, featured is this checkbox. And in Coda, a checkbox is true if it's checked or false if it's unchecked. So that's the key piece of information we need to know here. So let's jump on back. So here, if we open this up, give it a right click, Notice what we've got is even though our formula is starting to get bigger, there are some things that are really familiar here. So again, the beginning and the end, exactly the same as what we've seen before. And then also this part, type contains type A and category equals product. That is exactly what we just had in the previous exercise. The only thing that we're adjusting is we now have this new part, which is featured is equal to true. And then we've got this or. So if we think about the sentence that we just read, right? Find the number of blog posts, so number of blog posts by going to blog posts that are featured, great, featured is true, or has both of the following conditions. Type A contains type A and category equals to product, and then I want to find the number of them. So notice this formula is reading exactly like that sentence because we're using things like or and just like we would if we were asking a question. Al, anything else on this one that you think is helpful to point out to folks?
The main thing is that this is probably the most similar thing to Excel and Google Sheets is when you're doing an if statement and you're trying to like do and or. You're also doing nested parentheses when you have and or different conditions. In this case, you notice how there's right to the left of type, there's left parentheses, and then to the right to the right of product, there's two parentheses. And that's because featured equals true is like the top level thing we're trying to figure out.
Most important.
Most important. And then or the type and category are in their own parentheses because that's being treated as its own entity. And if you're coming from Excel or Google Sheets, it's probably the same exact way you're used to doing things, except the main difference is that you're referencing cells to match these conditions versus in Coda, you're using these names of rows and tables.
The other thing I want to highlight about this formula is that this formula also can grow just like you, right? We've seen how this formula has grown already. It's growing with our requests. So even though you put a formula in your Coda doc, you can always be adding more to it. Like, oh, we've actually added this other element to our table. I now want to add a little bit here because you've already got all these little modules and you can just be, tacking on things like, oh, I want to also include featured as true. And I can always just select all of this and do copy, Control C or Command C if you're on a Mac like me, and then paste it elsewhere. So you can be working with these in multiple ways. The other thing that I think is helpful to know is notice right now it says it's an unnamed formula. If this is a formula you plan to use all the time inside of this Coda doc, I could call this like Maria's special formula. So special, I can't spell it correctly. Now it has a name. And now what I could do is if I'm in my Coda doc, I can just do equals and say Maria's special formula. Now that's going to pop it in. So if you've got like a special calculation you do for maybe the types of sales that you offer or whatever it might be, you can always name your formulas too. Al, if you think about naming formulas, when do you do that? Do you have that as part of your kind of Coda doc practice?
Yeah, especially when I'm trying to output the results of something is when like, I'm working on a doc and like the output of the numbers and the results and the summary is really important for the end user. This is really common. Let's say if you're trying to build an invoice in Coda or a sales report, I'm constantly naming my formulas so I can reference those formulas elsewhere in my report or in my output. Again, if you're coming from Excel or Google Sheets, this is the same thing as named ranges in Excel because you can name like a list of cells or you can name a single cell, and then you can kind of reference that name elsewhere in your Excel file. We brought that same kind of functionality into Coda. The main difference being is that you can put the results of these numbers anywhere in your doc. It doesn't have to be in a table. It can be as you're writing a sentence.
Awesome. Also, Marco, I love this point that you're making around kind of it'd be great if the formula builder was like kind of easier to write into, and I completely agree. One of the things that you can do inside of your formula builder, and this is also something that we're thinking internally about, how could we, because formulas are so freaking powerful, how could we make it even easier to write those more complicated ones? What I will say is you can do these on different lines. And now I don't usually do new line formulas because I don't have a lot of complex formulas in the docs that I use every day. So Al, please hold me accountable to this. We could do like blog post, filter, the doc title is equal to, sure. And then I could go ahead and add like a new line. How do we add new lines again, Al?
Just Shift Enter while you're inside
Shift
there.
Enter. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. We're all learning together. We'll do blog posts dot filter, where the category, no, not hyperlink card. Come on. Category, there we go. I was just tabbing too quickly, is equal to Al's column. And then I can do Shift Enter. And then I could do like, and the type contains whatever. So you can do that Shift Enter trick to just keep having new lines. That might help make it a little bit easier to track as you're writing those more complex formulas. So something to think about there, Marco.
Yeah, this is also, I mean, it's a small feature, but it's different than Excel or Google Sheets because actually, if you're coming from the world of SQL, this might feel a little more natural to you because you can put all your multiple conditions and if, or, all that stuff into new lines, so it's more clear to read. And that's something you're pretty used to when you're writing a SQL query, but something I wish there was available in Excel and Google Sheets, because if you have a really long conditional statement, it's really hard to figure out, like, is this and included in this or is this or in the and, like what's on the outside of the parentheses? Any of you who've done complicated conditional formulas in Excel probably can feel the pain.
We've got a good question here from Matt, which is, can we change the named formulas over time so that if I update it once, then it will update everywhere? So with the named formulas, you can always change their name, and then that is going to just play out throughout your whole doc. One distinction I do want to make is that named formulas are on a doc by doc basis. So it's not something that's separate, sort of part of your whole Coda account that can be used across all your docs. Just an important distinction there, because Coda docs are kind of like little mini apps in and of themselves. Anything else on named formulas, Al, with regards to Matt's question? I think that's great.
Yeah, I think the one thing, maybe the question is the question behind the question, I think, is when you pull up name ranges in Excel or Google Sheets, you get a whole list of all the name ranges. And when you click on, I actually really like the way Google Sheets does it, is when you click on the name range, it brings you to where that's being referenced. I don't believe you have this in Coda yet. You have to kind of search for your name ranges in the search box in a Coda doc. So that is one. I mean, it's definitely a feature request. I mean, I want to add to Coda, but that is one thing where it's like, if you want to bulk change or edit name ranges in Excel or Google Sheets, it's relatively easy to do. In Coda, we don't have like a menu where it's like, hey, here are all your name formulas and now you can rename them all. We don't have that feature yet, but it's something we'll definitely add.
And we also have another question here from Christian, which is, we cannot start named formulas with numbers. I actually don't know if that's true. Al, do you know off the top of your head? Otherwise, I'm going to try it.
I don't know. This is let's do a live demo.
Right click. We'll name this number. All right, 1. Let's see if we have this work. I've just renamed that 1, so I'm going to do equals and 1. Yeah, so in this case, because a number is a unit of math, right? That this Coda doesn't know how to distinguish between equals the number 1 or equals the unnamed formula. So great, live demo. We just learned that. Cool. All right, so let's take a look at this particular exercise. Also, keep these questions coming, folks. I absolutely love it. So what we want to do here is we want to make a bulleted list of the blog posts from Al's column that mention Coda in the description. So here's the answer. And I will say that bulleted list is one of my favorite formula pieces because I think it's a great way to take something that feels really mathy and make it textual, which I'm a writing first person. So I always love that I can take table information and create like a bulleted list like we have here. So let's right click. So here we are. Notice there's one thing that is the same. We start with the blog post table. And instead of having count at the end, I'm just saying, hey, Coda, I want you to make a bulleted list with that information, but it's holding the same place as count. So the same purpose of what do we do with that information? So here we can see at the bottom, we've got contains. This is the name of our select list. I should have done a better job naming the select list so it was clearer. But the category containing whatever's in that select list, in this case, it's a multi-select, so we want it to be contains. But now we have this new one, which is find. Al, do you want to talk a little bit about the find function inside of Coda?
Sure, Maria. The
Thanks.
the
Having
the
too much fun.
find yeah the find function is again, I'm putting on my Excel Google Sheets hat. This is the equivalent of search in Excel and Google Sheets, where you're actually searching for like whether or not a cell of text contains a specific text, for
Mhm.
instance. So I'm trying to find if I have the sentence, the red fox jumped over the brown fence or whatever. If I want to, if I want to in Excel or Google Sheets, I would say cell A1 dot search fox. And since that sentence contains the word fox, the result of the formula will be true. So we're the same thing in Coda. The same functionality for search is applied to the find function in Coda, where we're trying to find the word Coda in a sentence somewhere in a cell in the description column.
Yeah, and in this case, we're saying greater than 0 because we're saying anywhere in there, right? We're not looking for,
Mhm.
is it at a certain position? Like if I wanted to know, is Coda mentioned 10 characters in, then I would say greater than 10. But in this case, I'm looking for the whole thing. Also, this is actually a really good segue into Craig's question, which is it possible for the control input to be text, kind of like creating a search bar? So in this case, we don't have like a search bar control type, but there is a way to kind of create your own search bar using it's regex max, right, Al? Which sounds like
Uh,
a really cool superhero character, but it's actually a search term. And while you're chatting out, I'm going to go to the community because I think we've got a couple search bar hacks there. Yeah.
yeah, it's possible to control input to be text, search terms to return anything that contains it. I'm trying to understand the question. Search terms return anything that
I think wanting
contains
to
it.
like create like a search bar, right? Like, oh, I want to know in this table, how many things have the word Coda in it. So instead of doing the
Oh,
find
I
formula,
see.
to have like a search there. And I know we've got a couple little community hacks on this. So I'll pull
Yeah,
down.
yeah. The most common hack I've seen is you create a really small table. By really small, I literally mean like it's one column and one row, and then that one cell is kind of like your input, and you're typing your search query into that one cell in that one little table, and then you filter your main table with all the data that has like all the words and sentences by that one little table with a cell in it. Definitely kind of a workaround and a hack. We're trying to find better ways of doing this, but that is one thing I've seen pretty often in people that try to build this kind of search functionality inside their doc.
All right. I think I've got a um, community article that should help there. So that should help out with that question, Craig. Yeah, we're definitely with you. We'd love to have that be a better way. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, awesome. So let's go ahead and get rid of uh, exercise 5 and move on to exercise 6. So in this case, we want to find the number of blog posts that meets the following conditions. It has only type A in the type column. So if you remember back in our data table, back over here, we've got this multi-select column of type. We want to know when it only has type A. So we're not interested in type A and type B together. We're only interested in that single value. So here's where we're going to use the contains only. So again, just like writing a sentence, hey, look at the blog post table, then show me any place where type contains only type A, and then count it. So this is exactly the same as some of the other formulas we saw at the top of our session today. The only difference is instead of having this be contains, we're having it be contains only. Al, if you think about contains only, how do you use this as part of your Coda practice?
I think it's when you want to just taking an example that I've seen is like if you want to filter a list of sales,
Mhm.
or let's say a filter a list of orders, and in each order, let's say someone bought shirt and pants, but in another order
Mhm.
they only bought a shirt. You might want to only isolate the orders where that person bought just that shirt because you want
Mhm.
to send them a specific email about that shirt
Yep.
because
You're
they
going to
really
upsell some
require that.
pants later.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to include the customers or orders that bought the shirt and the pants because it's not good for your analysis. So it's really when you want to pinpoint a specific like item that someone has bought in this case, and for a sales scenario. But you can apply this to like working with if you're working with your team members, and you want to find only the projects that contain a specific person that's assigned to that project, and you want to say, hey, maybe we should assign someone else to those projects because they're understaffed, because only one person is staffed on that project. These are some interesting use cases that you could use for the contains only. Having said that, I will say that I don't use this one too often because it's a little bit on the niche side of things, but it does work for specific use cases. And I think Maria froze. Let me just ping her really quick and see. Hey, Maria, you froze. Oh, looks like we're waiting for Maria to reconnect. I guess in the meantime, I'll just try to fill in the dead air. Actually, wonder if I can share my screen. That might be a good way to continue this foray into formulas. One thing I want to call out with the formulas we've talked about today is, especially for the exercise 5 and 6, actually, let me, I'll share my screen really quick. And when Maria comes on, I'll take off my screen. Let's see here. Okay, close the message. So I'll just zoom in a little bit. Let me make it so this screen is a bigger. Sorry, I'm like not used to moving around in Crowdcast as good as Maria.
If you can hear me, could you go ahead and just post a yes in chat? I'm so sorry, everybody. I guess now is a heavy Wi-Fi traffic where I live. Everyone's logging in. We're breaking Crowdcast.
Oh boy. Well, okay. Let me just talk.
Rudely cut us off today.
Yeah, Maria, you froze for like a few seconds there, but
oh goodness,
we got you.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, back to exercise 7. Is this better now, Al?
Yep.
We good? All right, fab. Cool. Anything else that you were sharing, Al, while I so rudely interrupted us?
No, I was trying to fill that air, and then I accidentally closed the window, so I totally crashed the Crowdcast.
Well, we're all human. It's okay. I'm just glad that we're all back together again. And thanks everybody for your patience.
Yeah, but no, I was just saying that this is a niche kind of function that I don't use too often, contains only. But now let's talk about contains all.
Yeah, so exercise 7, this is kind of the opposite of what we just saw, where we want to know only the times where it has type A and type B together. So in this case, notice we're using contains all, And how contains all works is you just create a list of what you're interested in. In this case, type A and type B. This list could be, though, as long as I wanted. So in Al's example of, an inventory of a store, this could be shirt 1, shirt 2, shirt 4, and pants 8. So contains all is a nice way to create like a bundle of what you're interested in, because maybe you want to know, I wonder how many of our customers buy all 4 of these products. I don't care if you bought just a onesie twosie. I want to know, did you buy all 4, so I could have the full list here. So contains all, again, a niche part of the formula language, but something I still think is really valuable for folks to know about.
Yep. And just one thing to point out here is that this formula, actually the last few exercises, this is kind of going beyond what Excel and Google Sheets is capable of. If you really think about what we're doing here, if you go to the blog post table, I just want to call out one thing for everyone here who's relatively new to Coda, is if you scroll to the right of the main blog post table.
Ta-da!
Okay. Notice how the type column, how that is a select list column, and there's multiple values in that column. So each row, rather each cell in this row, is like an array of other values. An array is a fancy word for saying list of values. This is something that is, from what I know, is really difficult to do in Excel or Google Sheets. How do you put multiple entities or values inside one cell? It's really not. I can't think of an easy way. If anyone in the chat is really an expert at Google Sheets or Excel, feel free to correct me. But we're basically filtering this table by this column that has multiple values in that column itself. So really hard to do this in Excel or Google Sheets, and that's really one of the main powers of Coda, where it's starting to feel a little bit more like a database more than just tables in an Excel file.
Yeah. And I also love, for all these lookup columns, you can always hover over it. In this case, these are just single rows without any context, so you don't see much. But if I hover over like launch, for example, it shows me all the good stuff. So I see everything that's part of that table as well. Awesome. So let's take a look at our final exercise for today, exercise 8. In this case, we want to find the number of blog posts that were published during the time period listed in the date picker control. So this is, again, one of those controls we can add to our Coda docs just by typing / and then I could do date picker. So notice we have date range and also just an individual date. You could also include a date and time. So that's how I did that here. Now I've got this handy little thing. I can just click and I can see, show me the last 7 days, the last 30 days, this week. I love that this is just a quick filter on the week, or last week and this week. And then also future, and even a fixed date range here. So how this works, if we reveal the answer and right click, notice the pink, it's telling me, hey, this is the pink thing that you're looking for, because that's why it's a different color than the green, which is part of a table. Because again, we can always click and be able to see exactly what each of these are. In this case, we are using matches, though. Contains does not work on these date ranges. Matches is what we'll use with those date ranges on these controls. Al, anything else on kind of why matches here? I think, honestly, this is sort of an archive, a leftover from kind of Coda history. But I'm curious if you have any other perspectives on that.
No, yeah, I'll be honest, like I don't use matches very much anymore in my docs, so I would always default to contains now. It is kind of like a vestige of our formula language, as I've mentioned a few times in the past during this podcast. So yeah, we'll just default to using contains. But if you know like your doc is only going to be having that one-to-one, then by all means use matches. There might even be, this is really getting to the fringes. For those of you who are coming from Excel or Google Sheets, this is getting to the argument of like, for those of you who are coming from Excel, you've probably heard the argument of when to use VLOOKUP versus index match. And the general consensus is that index match is more performant than VLOOKUP. Now with Coda, I can't guarantee this, but my hunch is that matches might be more performant than contains, because contains has to like look up a bunch of values in this other list of a bunch of values, whereas matches, it only looks up one value in a bunch of values. So it could be faster, maybe if your doc is really big, but if your doc is not super big, like thousands of rows, it doesn't really matter whether or not you use contains or matches, it's still going to feel, your doc is still going to feel really fast.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we are coming to the end of our time here together, everybody. I'm more than happy to stay if folks have a few more questions if they'd like to ask them. Otherwise, I just want to thank all of you for spending some time with us, getting better at formulas, nerding out with us. I will say, if you master filter formulas, which we talked about in the last Formula Fitness, which you can watch a replay of on both our YouTube and our Crowdcast channel, and then master contains and matches, you honestly are going to be set for most of the docs that you'll use as part of your daily work and life. I honestly find that these are like the ones that I use pretty much every time. And this can get you really, really far. Al, any other closing thoughts for folks before we see if there's any other questions and end for today?
No, I think the other thing is if you look through our template gallery, coda.io/gallery, it's also a good way to deconstruct how formulas are built. And you'll also see that most of the formulas in our gallery use filter, contains, and matches. So we're not just saying that because we use them, we're saying because like all of you who have contributed templates to our gallery are using them as well. So yeah, and you can see some really interesting use cases of how people are using filter, contains, and matches to filter their docs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I will send a the copy of the workout doc to you right now. I'll put it in chat over there. Thanks, Karina. And again, remember that for any doc that you copy that you have edit access to, you can always just right click on any formula and be able to see how it's made. I can say for myself, that's one of the main ways that I learned Coda formulas when I was just getting started. So just like, how's this made? What's going on here? Interesting. I wonder why that is. And poking around and playing, feeling comfortable breaking things, because Control Z and Command Z exists for a reason. I know I'm such a hacker, Marco. It's true. All right, I'm going to pop a link to this doc over there in chat for all of you. Otherwise, I just want to thank all of you so much for spending some of your time with us. I know I always find so much joy when we get to spend some time together. I really appreciate all of the input, all of your questions. Let us know if there's anything else that you're interested in. We do plan on hosting more of these Formula Fitness ones. Otherwise, I definitely recommend check out the ability to what am I trying to say? Check out the Coda community. I'm doing too many things. I was grabbing the link for Karina and then got all messed up. Definitely join the community. It's where we have lots of other conversations happening and going on, and it's a really great place to connect with other folks like you. All right, y'all, have a great rest of your week, great rest of your day. It's been a pleasure. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. All right, bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye. Take care.
Oh, I'll adjust that, Karina. I'll make sure that you can copy. Let me do some things on the back end. Give me like 5 minutes and that same link should be ready. All right. Bye.
Bye.